All right, you're listening to the Hope City Drip, and this is a podcast of our local church. So thanks for clicking on this. And our goal with this podcast is that you would learn more about our mission and our vision of our local church, Hope City Church, but that you would also just be in general encouraged and stirred on to live for the glory of Jesus and the joy of your local community. And so this is just a great opportunity for you, whether you're at home listening to this. Maybe you're a stay-at-home mom and you have a short attention span, right? Like my wife. And because she has kids running around demanding every ounce of her energy and every ounce of her attention. And so she's got to press pause often, rewind often. Or whether you're a shift worker and you're driving to work and you got 45 minutes to burn, why don't you listen to this podcast? So I just hope that this is helpful for you, that it would stir your affections to Christ. And you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Ben Parker.
And my name is Nick Powell. And so we are, on this episode, I want to talk about with Ben, really what are some of the conversations that we've been having just kind of, I don't know, in passing. Seems like have orbited around a very similar topic. And that topic, I would say you could sum it up as the after effects of COVID, or the after effects of just living through 2020, 2021, whether that's, the political culture that we're living through, the racial tensions, the pandemic and what that's done, that's affected the church. Mm-hmm. It's affected a lot of things, but this podcast is primarily concerned with the church. And we love the local church, and we love our local church, our little church plant, and we're trying to really be clear with the gospel and make disciples, get on mission. And part of that is, we want people to see the church how we see the church, like not that we have a perfect understanding of the church, but we're passionate about the church. God has used the local church to really shape our lives. And so we want other people to experience that same joy. And it's really tough for me personally to see the level of cynicism, the level of distrust, the level of apathy, joylessness, anger, anxiety, all the bad emotions, all the bad things people are taking into and putting on their church experience. Mm-hmm. And that's really been hard to watch. So I don't know, do you share some of those same, I feel like you share some of those same observations.
Yeah, it's been hard to see people that super valued community, and then now we're just in hiding and scared to be around people. Mm-hmm. And it's just really weird to see that 180 degree switch.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I mean, you have people for example, the church I grew up in at First Baptist here in Clinton. I've been talking with my mom, my grandma, and other people who are at First Baptist. I'm like, hey, how are you doing? And they've gone from pre-pandemic they were at 140 people coming on Sunday mornings, and down to 6 people for they were at 6 to 12 under a dozen people for a couple Sundays. And I know I think they've had to shut down. A lot of churches shut down. Mm-hmm. And so you're talking 0 people on Sundays. And then for the last year, over a year, people have been tuning in online. And this has been every church, right? Yeah. And I feel like established churches feel it even more. They go from a 20-year familiar habit to going to church and doing life with these people to not going at all. Yeah. And I find that to be very interesting. So there's been a massive disruption in the habits of people going to church. And we're living now through a change in season, I think, right? The vaccine has come out. People are taking it. They're feeling more confident. And so now, I feel as a church leader, I feel like there's a responsibility to be attentive to what God is doing in bringing people back into the local church. So whether it's First Baptist or Hope City Church or other churches in the community, maybe you don't even live in Clinton, but I bet you're experiencing somewhat of a renewed interest, at least in integrating back into communities of people.
Yeah.
Might not even be church, but so we're pulling for the church. But I don't know. What are some things?
We're team church.
We're team church. That's team right. Church. So what are some things you're noticing, as habits, people and their habits as it relates to the local church?
Oh, I'm noticing more acceptability to be distant. like to be at home and watching.
Acceptability, like socially acceptable? Or,
Yeah, like
okay.
like it's a even from the church leadership, not anywhere specific, but just places I've seen where it's like, yeah, they want to welcome you. Obviously, I'm not saying this is all horrible, but like they're accommodating people more online than they are at home, or
Right.
to come in.
Right.
And that's just weird that to like see that.
It is interesting. It's different because, I see like words, the way people shape words. The church is very careful with words because that's primarily what we, work with. That's our materials. And one of the things I've noticed is that when you get on people's online content, especially if it's a streaming service, streaming Sunday morning service, it says "Welcome to church," like intentionally framing it as if you are at church if you're participating online. And I think that, well, that's for sure something unheard of in church history. And then that's, I'm not saying that's pejorative necessarily, like it's bad, because we haven't had the internet for all of church history. So I mean, there's that, but it is interesting. I don't know, like I never experienced. That was always a resource ever since the tools the digital tools came out. But it was definitely not a supplement. So I don't know. I've finding it interesting that it's becoming more of an accepted supplement to church. And so I don't know.
I guess I'm just trying to think of, since I was saved, what year is it? 2021? 6 years ago?
Yeah.
I needed to be in church on Sundays and around people.
Yeah.
Just with my mental struggles and mental health. So it's like, I can't imagine being at home and yes, you're worshiping Jesus in your own way, but not being able to share that and share life with other people. I just can't imagine that. Like, I can't imagine myself being able to do that. It was hard enough during the pandemic. Yeah. But like to do it permanently.
Right. So I wrote down some things that I thought has been an outcome, some of the outcomes of this season the church has gone through. And one of the phrases I've never heard before, which I find to be very interesting, is self-churching. Yeah. I've heard the word SelfCare, which I think is even more, that's still a modern term, and I haven't lived very long. I'm 32. Holy cow. I think I turned 32 this April. Yeah. You care more about your kids' age. I feel like at a certain point, hit that dad life.
Totally.
Dad life forgets how old he is. But one of the things I've noticed is that, so like if you read books, they're in books, people are commenting on, we live in a very therapeutic age where a lot of the vocabulary that we use refers to the psychology, like there's psychological words, like getting to my safe place. Or, when even people talk about being harmed, they're not primarily talking about being harmed physically. Oftentimes you're hearing people talk about being harmed psychologically. Yeah. Been bullied psychologically. I've been, all those things. And I'm not discrediting that. It's just we live in a very therapeutic psychological age. And so one of the terms that gets thrown around is self-care. I got self-care. And so taking time out of your busy, anxious schedule, you're taking time to like drink more water and to focus on you and to get rid of toxic relationships and, whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, self-care. And I've heard the term self-church, and I think it locks in right with that understanding of the world, right? Like, I don't know if you've seen that.
Self-church?
Self-churching. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got some friends that are doing it, and they love it. They're watching a church that's not even in the state they live in, and and they love it, but no community aspect. And with the pandemic and everything, and they're not really seeing many people. They see, I think, maybe some family members or something like that, but it's just. But hey, we live for that Sunday morning, and it's just really hard. It's really weird to see, like, especially someone that came from knowing them from a distance for a lot of years, and like, they used to be really planted in churches, and now it's like they want this. Right.
Yeah, and I do think that it comes from what I've observed. I think it comes out of a place of exhaustion and burnout, like self-care, secular self-care is. Right. I think people don't want to go into church right now because it's a polarizing place. It's a anxious place. It's full of anxious people, you know, and especially through the election. I mean, you've had this perfect storm, I feel like, of stuff like the election, huge racial tensions, like just a lot of stuff that's hitting the media, and people are consuming these stories that, whether it's in the vaccine is the same thing too, is that almost all of these massive events and decisions are splitting down political lines. You know, if you're not getting the vaccine, you're probably a conservative. Mm-hmm. If you're getting the vaccine, you're probably a Democrat or whatever. And so I think people, when they go into churches, they see them as politically charged atmospheres.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think that's got to be some people's reservations walking into church. I don't know. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, I was gonna say you can, because then you notice the like some before COVID, or you know, a year or two ago, whatever, they would like not really think of that as much, and still be able to love someone, you know, at church or whatever your community aspect is,
like agree to disagree kind of vibe.
Yeah, still be able to say hi, look them in the face, and hear their story.
Sure.
And now I feel like with everything that's going on and being distant from communities for so long, it's like people don't want to cross that political aisle, that, you know, religion aisle, whatever border you got that's dividing these sides, that they don't want to jump that, because they have made up in their mind that like they almost hate the other side. Right. And they don't want to like even go over to love them.
Right. I think it's affecting. So I would lump ourselves in the evangelical space, the evangelical church. Broadly speaking, the evangelical church is just like, that term is just reference to people that believe we have good news of Jesus, and that in the gospel, the good news of Jesus, that there is life and that there is salvation. So it's worth spreading. We want to go and tell the world like about this Jesus that we worship. And so evangelical Christians,
there's not churches like that.
Well, there is not. Yeah, there are a bunch of churches that are not like that. Interesting. But then evangelical gets fuzzy because it gets like lumped into with like a voting block and all that. So like, the evangelical vote, you know. But evangelical Christians in general are Christians that are just like, hey, we just need to like make disciples. So they're not necessarily Lutheran first or Catholic first. Mm-hmm. They're like Jesus Christians, so we're gonna go out anyways. So evangelicals, we're evangelical Christians, and I feel like in that space, like in the evangelical group, especially among like church planting churches, this has uniquely affected them. Mm-hmm. In some areas that I don't know, tell me if you don't feel like you're observing this, but I feel like there is there's sort of this, how do I put this? I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget what I was thinking, but burnout. So we talked about burnout, I feel like a few podcasts ago, but I was thinking about the burnout that happens when you're at a church that's really rooted in the personality of one or two people. And and so you feel that like you're losing momentum. So if you're thinking about a church plant, some church plants operate exactly like businesses. And businesses, when they experience a disruption, they lose momentum and they try to innovate. And innovating in order to retain customers. You know, you have goods and services that are no longer being consumed, and so you need to innovate so that you can deliver the goods and services in a way that your customer actually wants to purchase. And a lot of churches operate like they feel that way. And so the personality of the pastor becomes like this spokesperson who's trying to sell me something, you know? And so he's constantly dropping references to some political point, or he's constantly trying to get you to give. He's constantly trying to get you to like serve on all the ministry teams, and it just feels desperate. Yeah. And I've felt that pressure as a leader, as a church leader. So I'm not just pointing fingers at everybody else, but I just feel like we live in a volatile church world, and the average Joe who's been very involved in churches, especially people who've been very involved in evangelical church planting churches, are not wanting to walk into that space and be asked to do a bunch of stuff that makes them anxious because they've been burned by that. And they feel the tense desperation from us leaders who are like, please come back to church or I won't get paid. You know, it's that kind of vibe, and it's gross. Nobody wants to be around that. They're like, we're doing God things. It's not about money, is it? And all these leaders are like, well, it's a little bit about money because I got kids and my wife doesn't work and, all this. So anyways, I don't know. Am I just rambling, or do you feel like...
No, because you were telling me last month or two that you know someone or met someone here in town that is self-churching, and they listen to Bridgetown or whatever podcast it was out west. Or
it might have been Bridgetown. A lot of people listen to Bridgetown.
Someone that
especially
preached at Bridgetown or whatever. Anyway.
Yeah.
But they listen to that, and that's great. It's whatever. That's great. But it's like you're talking to him, and he was like, yeah, like you could just sense it. And I remember you telling me like he just needs to like come to church and just be around people. Just more so needs to like
that bro needs to come to church.
Just needs to like be around people.
Yeah.
And kind of loosen that burden.
Yeah.
But I think you had mentioned, I don't know his story. I don't know the guy. I don't know who it was. You didn't drop any names. But it was like, I don't know if there was some past hurt or past burnout there that caused a lot of that. So you're making a lot of points.
Yeah, well, so
with your sermon that you just went on.
Sorry. This is supposed to be a conversation, not a monologue.
Or you're drinking my water.
Yeah. Well, okay, quick story. So I've had a couple people that I've talked to about church, and one of the big hang-ups for people, big surprise, is the vaccine. I will come back to church if everyone's vaccinated. And it's not going to happen.
No.
Every group of people that you're ever going to be in now for the rest of your life is going to be, some are vaccinated and some are not. Even if you coerce it, people aren't going to follow that.
Yeah.
And because the police, people aren't they don't have time for that. Our government's not going to like round up every single human being and give them the vaccine. What the worst they'll do is require it for going to school and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
But anyways, so that's one of the hangups. And I feel like the only reason that is because, you walk into that, like if you go into church and you're like, oh man, some of these people aren't vaccinated. And the people that I've talked to that's a hang up for them, it's not even necessarily about the health. It's about knowing there are people willingly or like willfully making a point to say, screw you guys, I'm not getting vaccinated because I'm voting on these lines and I'm part of this party. And so you see a lot of abrasive personality. I don't know. Do you see a lot of abrasive people, like especially on social media?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like the pandemic didn't help any of that. There's obviously internet trolls since, Bill Gates invented the internet, but it's like...
I thought, what's his face invented the internet? Not Chuck Norris, but what's the other guy? Oh, I'll think of it. Never mind. There's probably somebody listening to this who's screaming the name right now.
You idiot!
Yeah.
But I think like COVID, it made people more comfortable be by themselves and then hide behind their screen. So now as they get out into public, they're carrying that cynicism or abrasiveness, out into the public and with a judgmental attitude. So like you said, someone's not going to come if they came to church and like they know people that aren't going to be vaccinated. They're not going to take time to know them or get to know them or talk to them or hear anything because they're just in their mind, nope, we're not going to get along.
Right. There's a clip that I think you sent it to me. I've seen it before. I've sent it to other people. But there's this pastor who is like giving this like intro to his sermon or something. He's wearing like a black vest. And and he yells that everyone is a derogatory term, like referring to like sissy basically. Mm-hmm. He calls his whole congregation, he's like, you guys are a bunch of sissies. And
then they're all cheering.
Yeah, everyone's like, yeah, that's right, pastor.
I am.
Yeah, it's weird, it's weird. Like churches right now are one of those spaces where they like groupthink becomes celebrated. And so, does not tolerating any difference or any diversity. And the irony of it is that I think to not go into that space is playing into that, well, let's just say the devil's tactic. It's the devil that ultimately wants to undermine the local church. And it's not the Democrats, right? It's the Satan, evil. And so the devil's tactic is isolation, get you out of community, get you away from God. And so the irony is, by not wanting to go into these places that don't tolerate any sort of diversity of thought, is you end up isolating yourself even further. And it's just really ironic. So one of the things that I just want to throw out there to you and see what you think of this is, so like one of the concepts that drives my understanding of how I think through these issues is Paul uses the word church in the New Testament is ecclesia. So that means gathered assembly of people. It means called out ones. So God has called human beings out of the world and together in order to worship Christ and to also be a visible demonstration of what the power of the gospel does, which is bring diverse, hostile people together by the blood of Christ. And that's what's meant in Ephesians when because Paul's really, really concerned with church unity in Ephesians. Like, how do different people come together? Well, they don't just come together. Like, the world has bore witness to that throughout human history. There's been war after war after war, struggle after struggle, that people don't just decide to come together. Something has to be done about that. And so he says the dividing wall of hostility has been knocked down through Christ Jesus on the cross. And so one of the real dangers in isolating yourself in your homes, in your private homes with your private family, is that even if you did church with just your family, you're not showing the world that the gospel has the power to bring diverse people together. Because even unbelievers love their own family.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm not saying you can't do church, like that it's not been appropriate for you to be quarantining and being cautious about the virus. I'm making no comments on that. I'm just saying that if we look at the Bible's understanding of the church, we have to reckon with this stuff. That God's desire for us is not to be doing church digitally as a long-term solution.
Yeah. So,
I don't know. What do you think about that?
I agree. I mean, I agree.
Is there any nuance you think you would add? Like, because we're talking about, what are some of the after effects that we're noticing? Because I think right now, the reason I even want to talk about this whole conversation is because people are reintegrating back into different spaces because they're getting the vaccine. Which inevitably is going to make more people comfortable who even the ones that don't get the vaccine. So there's going to be more people going back to church.
Hopefully.
Yeah. But there'll be some that won't. I think there's going to be some people that still use DoorDash and that still, tune into their favorite preacher.
It's comfortable.
Yeah. So what would you say to somebody who says, bro, I'm good. I don't need to go back to church. I do church in my car. I do church in my living room.
I guess I would ask them what they mean by church. What do they define church as? Just the sermon, the worship, do they
feeling they get?
Yeah. What's your start there and just see what they want to say, but then point them. I mean, easily point them there to Ephesians if I really wanted to just seem smart.
Yeah, seem smart.
Well, the Bible says. And but then it's like, I don't know. The church is. I guess for me, I had to wrestle with this stuff, but it's like, how many years ago did we just start getting technology introduced into church?
Yeah.
As far as being able to listen to sermons, being able to have music instruments, let alone, what we have today, what we're blessed with today. And it's like, man, they've been doing this for 2,000 years of intentionally meeting together, and they needed it, and they did it, and that was what their community was. They went through suffering and we still are Christians going through suffering but not, can't imagine. In America, I guess we can't think of what. I think that's probably a big thing, is we have it really well in America. For as much as people don't want to agree, we have it very well in America, that we can do it on our own because we don't have anything persecuting us.
Yeah.
So we think doing church in a home by ourselves and maybe sending a $10 writing check to whatever sermon or charity you use or whatever is a good deed. That's church.
Yeah.
Because we have so distanced ourselves from being persecuted and going through suffering.
Yeah. I love that. So I want to throw out caricatures of people, at risk of creating straw men and women. I think this could be helpful. So let me put a hypothetical person in front of you. Hypothetical person number one, how would you encourage this person? So this person has been fearful of the virus. They've not wanted to integrate back into church life because they're afraid. They don't want to get sick. They're at risk, all this stuff. And so they're just kind of wondering, how do I even do this thing? How do I even, like, maybe they're convinced. Like, you don't even have to convince them. The Word of God, they want to come back to church. They just, they don't want to get sick.
Yeah.
So, like, how would you encourage that person?
I guess for like right now, we are meeting in St. Irenaeus, and I can only speak to our thing. I can't speak. I know there's
You can't hypothetically talk about other churches.
I can't talk about So
they want to come to Hope City.
They want to come to Hope City. So I'd be like, hey, we're in this 450 building or person capacity building, and
it seats a lot of people,
and that a lot of people aren't there right now. So you can, we'd love to have you there. We can accommodate for you. We can distance ourselves as you walk in if you'd like, but we'd love to just smile at you. You can wear a mask if you'd like. You will, let you sit if you want to sit in a kind of a way, but we'd love to have you there. Just be involved and be able to just kind of start getting back in. And because I remember going to my first church service from April to when I went back in October or September, and it just felt good. Like, I just felt a shift in my spirit.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just think that would be a great spot for them, like, just to hear live music. It's not going to be, sorry if you're listening to this and you're expecting Bethel music at Hope City. We're kind of better. But then...
I lead the worship right now, and I know for a fact we're not better.
I know for a fact you don't party. But they... I don't know. I just think that would be like really a good start. We're not forcing ourselves to hug them. We're not forcing ourselves, on them or any ideas. It's just we just want them there. Just get them there.
Yeah. So
accommodate them and get them there.
Yeah. And I think I would say too that you have to. Ultimately, this is something that you have to use your wisdom. I mean, I don't know. Like, I know a particular circumstance where there is a husband and wife, and they live with a relative, an older relative, and the older relative's at risk, and it's like you don't know where they're going to be at. A lot of people I've talked to, their older grandma or grandpa is like cautious, or they're really like, I don't even care, I just want to get back in, and so there's a lot of variables that affect why people don't want to get back into church, and so I never want to assume people's motives. I think that's just a good rule of thumb as Christians, that we should just never assume people's motivations. We should just assume that everyone's having a hard time and that they need a good measure of grace and love and bearing with people and long suffering. So I just want to recognize too that, like, as a pastor who gets paid by the church, like there is a pressure on me to be like, come back to church, please, so you can give money to the church so that you can pay my bills. Like, it's not a secret. So making money, preaching the gospel, making disciples, and serving the church is not immoral, right? Like, it's in the Bible. And so I've given my life to this as my vocation. And so I have to check myself. Like, hey, are you losing like, Nick, am I losing patience because of selfish reasons or because of righteous reasons? And so I constantly have to wrestle with God about that.
Yeah.
Just being totally honest. And I think that everyone's experiencing a different degree of that. So what would you say to the person that says, if you're not back at church, you're being a sissy. You're probably a Democrat liberal, and you better come to church, or you're, probably voted for Biden. Like, what would you say to that person if that person presented himself to you or herself to you?
What side of Ben am I that you're...
The Christ-like side.
Christ-like. Okay, cool.
In the spirit, striving to...
I don't say that like I would be like, yeah, brother. I'm just saying I would say one thing that probably wouldn't be... It'd be more direct.
Sure.
To be like, are you going to say that to their face, or are you hiding behind a screen?
Yeah, sure.
And then the other one of Christ-like is, where do you see... If you love Jesus, if you're declaring that you love Jesus, God and country... Where in the scriptures are you seeing Jesus do anything like that?
Right.
Where? And
Yeah.
And oh well, they voted. No, where are you seeing Jesus do anything like that?
Right.
Because I think that if you hit people with that, and that's kind of be the hard line. I have a different approach to this than a lot of other people. I think coming out of the pandemic, there's gonna be certain people that need a lot of grace, because I think it's also an amazing opportunity right now for people that didn't know Jesus, went through pandemic by themselves, and like, I think this is hard for people in Iowa and even in Texas where I was at to be even relating to. But can you imagine being in Manhattan by yourself for almost a year now in lockdown, like by yourself?
Yeah.
And not being able to do anything. And so people like that didn't know Christ, went through this loneliness and just like longing for something else, a meaning, and like, oh, I'll step into a church. I think there's got to be a lot of grace for them.
Yeah.
But I also think there's going to be like a hard line of like, especially just in the cultural moment of like, no,
Right.
this is not what Jesus is doing.
Right. Yeah. Like, our church is not a team.
Like, we're not meant to look like the culture, like the world. And it's like, I think that's a bad thing, a big thing right now when people think of Christians. We're just the other side of the aisle, launching the same missiles, same rocks back and forth at each other. And it's like, what are we doing that's anything Christ-like in this?
Yeah. We have to be Team Jesus before we're Team Republican or Democrat. And that was one thing that I've really respected out of our sending church pastor, Cole, is that through the pandemic, because that's where we were, our family was at Frontier through the pandemic and for the beginning of it. And it was like, he would say constantly, we're a Jesus church. And even in our church plant at Hope City here in Clinton, I know we have people that lean more Republican, conservative, and I know we have people that lean more Democratic and progressive, and like just as far as politics go. And that's okay.
But we're all gathered, up until a couple weeks ago, gathered in your house on Sunday morning. Like, they're talking about house projects and stuff. And you would never know what color their voter ID card is.
That's right. Yeah. And experience does color a lot of this, I feel like, is that because, I know, I know a couple folks who are in the healthcare field, and they saw firsthand, like they have up close in your face look at what this virus has done to people. And so of course that shapes the way that they think. Like, they're getting the vaccine and they're voting in a way that seems to bank on the science that comes from the CDC and things like that. And so that's where they're going to swing. And I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. So I just think that, like, again, Ephesians, Paul's talking to this church. He's saying, look, he says, I love this in Ephesians 3. He says, the manifold wisdom of God is revealed through the church. Like the multifaceted, multidimensioned, I've heard that described as like a diamond that keeps turning, and you see all the glittering, reflections coming off the multi-shaped piece there. I haven't picked up too many large diamonds to know what that's like, but
me neither.
I can imagine.
I don't know if I picked up a diamond.
just the ones on my wife's finger. So, what was I saying?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
You started talking about
diamonds. Oh, the multifaceted wisdom and glory of God. So yes,
of course, yeah.
we have to be able to bring difference together, not for the sake of difference being together, but because Jesus brought us together.
Yeah.
And so I think being in person with one another, doing life with one another through long suffering, through disagreements, through all that, like, I think it's worth it.
Yeah.
I totally think it's worth it.
It's like, I saw the show about 12, 15 years ago that came out, and there was a great philosopher on it, and he said, ELE.
I know this is going to be a joke, isn't it?
Everybody love everybody. Jackie Moon, baby. Semi-pro.
Jackie Moon? Semi-pro. Oh, I haven't seen that in a long time.
But, it's a comedy, but go love people.
That's awesome.
Just go love people.
Right.
I don't know. I got one more. I don't know if you...
I don't have anything else because I told us, we made another goal that we're going to be done in a half hour.
We're 6 over.
I know.
I think one thing that, especially when it comes to the self-church, the danger of that is because when you're looking at the people that I know in my generation, if they're self-churching, they're not going to watch. Well, I guess we don't have a live stream, but they're not going to watch like your small town live stream that has poor quality because that's not their thing. They can't afford the, so they're going to watch. Name your mega church. Name your big church.
Yep.
That's great. But the danger of that is we start looking to them.
Right.
We start looking to humans. We start looking, even outside of the church, we start looking at a political party. We start looking at a figure, and that shapes our mind. And it's like we need to look to God. We need to look to Jesus, to the example that he's filtering down to us, and not to what the president, to the senator, to the pastor on TV, whatever it is, the LeBron James, whoever your idol is.
Yeah.
You got to look at Jesus.
Yeah. And so there was one thing I know people will anticipate a response like this. Someone will say, well, I am a part of the church. I'm part of the church, Christ's church. I follow Jesus. All I need is the Bible, Jesus, the Holy Spirit. Like, I'm good, man. Like, I am a part of the church, the global church, or the church of this area, right? And I just think that the Bible has no concept for that. Like, not that the Bible doesn't have a concept of the church being a corporate thing, like a global thing. It does. Christ is Lord over one church, his church. But the way that that's experienced and lived, you don't live anything like.
So what would
nothing is like that in life.
What would you say to someone that's part of like an online community group? Like it's a bunch of people that meet around America, and they watch the same church, and they do like a Wednesday night community group.
Yeah, it's like vacation.
Yeah.
It's fine. It can be rejuvenating and healthy, but it's definitely not something you could live your whole life doing. It's like, okay, so one of the primary metaphors for the church is the body of Christ. So that metaphor, we all have a part to play. We all function together. And that doesn't make any sense if it's John from 800 miles away. We just interact via Zoom. It's people that meet tangible needs, that flesh and blood gets together. And so that being the body of Christ metaphor, that's how you experience something of Jesus in a tangible way, Well,
we were talking the other day about self-denial. Mm-hmm. And I think even going to church is a self-denial.
Definitely.
Physical church. Whereas like online, it's a little bit, but it's like easier to cop out. You're still probably in your underwear and a t-shirt. And then you just like, log out, and just turn around and lay on your bed or.
Yeah, I got my whole afternoon. I go to Home Depot. We can do a project.
Yeah. It's a nice little Saturday we got.
That's right. So
I think just if you are a Christian, and I'm not perfect at this. I'm not saying by any means follow my example, but we're called to deny ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think just probably a beginning step to encourage someone in that. If they love Jesus and they're kind of nervous to get back in, be like, we're called to deny ourselves. Deny this part of your time and just try it.
Right.
And then be accommodating. Don't just dive off the high dive and, freak someone out. But
right. Yes. So that's, if I was putting my pastor hat on with somebody, my advice or counsel, whatever I would say to them is, hey, it's been probably needed for you to be distanced and to consume these things as tools, supplements. God does not look at you and say, shame on you for trying to keep others healthy or trying to keep yourself healthy. He doesn't say that. But I would say, let's be cautious. Wesley, I think it was Wesley, one of the older church guys was like, what can happen when we eat? He talked about this as a discipline of fasting. So this is in the context of a spiritual discipline. You said self-denial. That's what triggered this for me. Is that one of the things we have to be aware of when we have everything at our fingertips, like food, for example, is we can have whatever we want. We go into our pantries and we can get whatever we want. Is that what can happen is that we start to sensualize our souls. Is that when we're out of the rhythm of self-denial and discipline, then we begin to become fat around the heart. That's actually a biblical phrase. That's a heavy metal song by a band named King 810. which is, they're intense. They're kind of like Slipknot. I wouldn't recommend young kids listening to them, but they have a song called Fat Around the Heart. And that's a biblical, it's a biblical understanding. Like Calvin uses that in his Institutes. That's where I read it. He said, he literally used the phrase fat around the heart. And I was like, that's a metal song. Calvin was so heavy metal. But that, it would be my caution to anyone that's doing digital church perpetually.
Yeah.
Is you might be growing fat around the heart. And I know that sounds kind of hard. It doesn't mean that you should feel any sense of shame over it. But I do believe that if that hurts a little, like conviction, that might be the spirit of conviction. God saying, brother, sister, I love you, and this thing is done better in community with flesh and blood. And now, because then you get the whole host of issues with that. Like, right, you go back to church, and now you got Sally and Joe who are super abrasive, and they're always trying to talk politics with you, and you got Timmy over here who's playing with his yo-yo the whole time, and it's super distracting. I don't know. You have all sorts of weird things, but that's what keeps us not narcissistic group thinkers, right?
Yeah.
You're only doing life with your COVID bubble. Well, then you become like, I don't know how to talk. Like
you become like a hyper version of who you already were.
Yeah, you're just agreeing with everyone.
Yeah.
It's like your life is becoming a giant algorithm. You know, it's just,
Ooh.
you know, like you're on Facebook and it's your same crew. And then you go home and it's your same crew. And it's like, dang, that's dangerous. It's real dangerous.
That's good. That's good.
Why don't we end on
there?
Yeah, let's end on that. So if you're listening to this, my hope, I know this has been a nice hope, is that you don't feel shame from this podcast, but you feel genuinely stirred on that maybe reintegrating back into church means like go back to being with people, to go back being with my church. Whether that's at our church, at Hope City Church, or somewhere else, go find yourself a gospel-centered church, one that preaches the gospel out of the Bible, and one that is healthy. To the best of your ability, be able to find a church that is spiritually healthy, relationally healthy, and give each other grace.
Yeah.
I mean, man, we just need a long wick, and only God can give us that long suffering, long patience, because He has that, which is the best news of all, right? That God never stops loving us, no matter how far off the deep end we've gone, whatever side of the aisle or whatever issue, whatever. So, yeah, you got anything else to add to that?
No, I was going to add a point to say that too about we're not attacking anyone. We're saying in love the importance, because from experience, the importance of being in person with people.
Right. Yeah. We're just lovers of the local church because we love Jesus. Hello, Bourbon. We're going to end here. So yeah, whether you're a part of our local church or not, we just hope that this serves to help you live for the glory of Jesus and the joy of your local community.